What's going on, guys? Danny from Skateboard Strength, and welcome to the Buttery Hips program for skateboarders. This video is basically a follow along program that you can press play and just work along with me and get those hips feeling nice and buttery for skateboarding. In terms of equipment, you will need some form of a mobility ball. You can just basically use a hard lacrosse ball or a soft ball or a cricket ball if you're an Australian. But if you don't have it, you can simply just skip the first exercise and start from the second. I did try and keep this program to about 15 to 20 minutes, but I believe I have gone over. So if you need to stop a little bit sooner, simply get to where you can, press pause there and finish the rest of it another time. There's no harm, no foul done. If you can make it to the end though, there is some really nice stuff in here. Again, like I said, there was so much that I wanted to put into this program, but hopefully what we'll do is do another Buttery Hits program number 2 and get into some more advanced stuff. Let's get into it. Okay guys, so what we're gonna do first is we're gonna grab our mobility ball and we're gonna get into the lateral side of the hip and even the front of the hip a bit with some SMR work. So we're gonna get down onto a mat. It's really important that you're somewhere comfortable and not on like the hardwood floor here, because you're gonna need to be able to put your weight onto your elbow and distribute your load so that you're not so aggressive with how much weight you put into the ball. So I'm gonna get you to start on the lateral side of the hip. And as we do this, what's really important, guys, is that you don't put so much weight onto that hip that you tighten up. Like you can see as I'm going through this, that I can talk as I do it. And that's gonna be a really important thing. Adding really nice deep breathing is the other one, because it's gonna allow you to relax into it. If you're going so hard or it's so aggressive, this is the first time you've done this, that it feels so tight that you're having to hold your breath really tight, that's a really good indication that you're going way too hard. So use your breath as an idea of how hard you can actually go into this and how much weight you actually put onto it. I see so many people in around the gym and so many skaters make the mistake of just trying to go way too hard into it because they think that the more pain the better, and it's the complete opposite. It goes completely against what we're trying to do here, which is to get everything to loosen up. And so what I'm doing here is I'm basically going the lateral side of the hip, even at the back. I don't want to go hard up over the bone. I want to go in and around it and just create a nice motion. Now, if it is too much pressure, what you can do is take some of your weight off by distributing your weight onto the other foot at the front here and the elbow. And there's no hard press way in terms of how you set yourself up. If you feel more comfortable with the foot at the back, you can actually use that to explore different ranges of motion. I find this quite comfortable, have that foot up and over. I can distribute the load to that other leg and to my elbow. And if I want to, I can just drive more weight onto it. Now, before we change sides, what I want you to do now is you'll see I've created, this is where I actually do want you to have this foot in front. Now, the back of this ankle is gonna rest against my other knee. So from there, I'm gonna bend that knee, and now I'm going to do some internal and external rotating. As you can see, I'll turn around the other way so you can see it, all right, where that leg is going up and down, up and down. So I'll turn the other way so you can see this. So I'm in this position here. I've created that cradle there. The knee is in the back of that ankle. I'm gonna bend that knee to 90 degrees, and now I'm just gonna go in or up and down into internal and external rotation at the hip. And now I can change, move the ball around a little bit. And again, just rotating in and around. And that's gonna really create a nice bit of mobility and movement into that hip. So again, spend some time rolling in and around, and then look to go internal and external rotation on that side. Now, before I change sides, again, I can actually roll to the front, and you're just gonna wanna be really careful here. So basically, I'm trying to get just this front bit here in and around the hip. There's a lot of nasties that can kind of build up there, but again, you don't want to roll over the bone, but this is also a nice way to attack the front of the hip in terms of like the hip flexor. You see that's quite gnarly in there, so I'll spend a bit of time there. And with this one, what you can do is you can now flex and extend at the knee, and then also even look to open that hip up a little bit and roll up and down a touch. Let's see if we can get that out of the way. And that will allow you to just kind of get the front of the groin, front of the hip, and again, flexing and extending. All right, so now I'm gonna do the other side, guys, just so you have this in terms of a follow along. So again, I'm gonna set myself up and I'm gonna roll in and around. Oh, I lost my microphone. That's it, get that out of the way. Back and around. You can see my face with that one. That feels quite gnarly in there, so I'll just kind of spend a bit of extra time there. I'm gonna roll around, and now I'm gonna rotate that foot. So you can see at the back there, I'm rotating in and around. And then before I change up, I'm simply gonna roll on the front that little bit, see how this feels, and then potentially open that leg up to get that front. I'll flex and extend at the knee, back and forth, before I continue to kind of roll through and see if I can find any gnarly spots. So if I find a gnarly spot, what I'll generally tend to do is flex and extend there or create that movement. But otherwise, I'm just kind of rolling it around and trying to find anything that's really stands out. Okay, now, again, guys, so spend as much time as you want on this. I'm trying to move through this a little bit quicker just because I want to try and keep these under 15 to 20 minutes, which I'm doing shocking at. But yeah, if at any time you want to spend a bit more time on this, if you're getting a really good release in it, press the pause button, spend a bit more time on it, and then press the play button afterwards, and we'll continue to roll through these exercises. Okay, so our next order of business is we're gonna open up the back of the hip. So stretching out our glutes, we're basically gonna allow yourself to lay down. You're gonna bring one leg up and over and let the side of that ankle sit on basically your other knee. And then you're gonna grab through the inside here. So you'll see through this way, I've grabbed the inside and I'm gonna pull this towards my chest. Now, how far you'll be able to go is just gonna be dependent on your mobility and your range. So I'm gonna grab and then pull, and I'm just gonna allow myself to sit here. Now, I'm probably gonna work about 40 to 60 seconds. Ideally, you do wanna let it sit for a good minute and just kind of hold in this position. You can actually even, as you start to sit into it, push down on this side that little bit, just to kind of get that extra bit of mobility, the extra nice stretch. It actually feels quite nice because you can feel it opening up the backside of that hip. But yeah, really think about, as you're doing this as well, continuing to like pull your hands closer to your chest as you sit into the stretch, because you'll be able to get more and more range. Don't just kind of stay stagnant on the same spot and think that's my range. As you open up, you'll be able to pull more and more into it. Okay, so from there, I'm gonna change sides. I'm gonna hold in this position now. Do the same, I'm gonna hold for 40 to 60 seconds. And then I'll push out on that side that little bit as well, making sure I don't let go of the other knee, letting that come down. Just trying to push on that spot. And then I'll try and pull this a little bit closer to my chest. If your range is here, guys, that's totally fine as well. But yeah, eventually as you sit into it, and even as the rounds go on, you feel that you have more range, you'll be able to kind of pull into it a little bit more. And again, making sure that you can breathe through it rather than holding your breath because you're going too hard. All right, so now that we've done that, we're simply gonna take the hip for some range of motion. So we're just gonna superset that with some bridge reaches. So I'm gonna bridge my hip up, reach out on the angle. So bridge my hip up, reach out on the opposite side. So bridging, reach out and through, bridge, reach out and through, bridge, reach out and through, and just changing side to side. We're gonna go about 8 to 10 repetitions. Really making sure you extend at the hip, push up, and then down. All right, so now we're gonna go one more. So we're just gonna hold a nice big stretch again, laying back. This time you should probably feel like you have a little bit more going in as well, that you can pull a little bit higher up. And again, breathe into it. Really allow yourself to stretch into it. Really nice big deep breaths. And each time you breathe out, think about pulling a little bit closer up towards your chest. So we'll just go another 10 seconds here. 2, 1, awesome. Change sides. Now we're gonna do the same. Use the other hand, push out on that knee a little bit, see if you can get that posterior cuff of the hip to really open up and mobilize. Last little bits. 2, 1, cool, letting that go. All right, so now again, bridge, reach out on the angle, making sure you drive with your glutes, not driving with your lower back. So bridge, reach out to the side. And if you're having shoulder problems, you can simply just bridge, touch out to the side, rather than like bridge, touch out to the side. You don't have to come all the way up into that shoulder. The more you do, the more upper back rotation you get, which is gonna really help loosen that back up as well. So bridging up and side. And that's it. So before we move on to the next one, guys, if you want to spend another round on that, I know we only did 2 rounds and I maybe rushed the second one because again, I'm trying to keep these short, but feel free to hit the pause button, spend another round on it, good minute hold on each side and 8 to 10 bridge with reaches and you're golden. Okay guys, so the next one we're gonna do is a couch stretch to open up the front of the hip. In particular, really try and loosen up the hip flexors, which can get tight and can put a lot of strain on that front of the hip and actually even kind of pull our pelvis into a bad position, all right? So we're gonna need a chair. I'm gonna basically get a chair and put my toes onto it, and I'm gonna sit down in what looks like a lunge. Now, how far back you go is gonna be dictated by your range of motion. And to be honest with you, if you need to, you can kind of grab a pillow and put it underneath your knee because that will be a little bit higher and a little bit easier for you guys to start off with. So it'll just make it a little bit easier for you to get into position. I don't personally need it, so I'm just gonna go without. I'm gonna put my knee on the ground. Now, what's really important here is what I see most people do is they just try and dump their hip forward, all right? We wanna loosen up that front of the hip. And how we do that is I want you to what we call a posterior pelvic tilt. So if your pelvis is, say, tilted forward, that's anterior, you have a nice big arch in your lower back, I want you to go the opposite and tuck your pelvis under. And in tucking your pelvis under, we're gonna stretch that front of the hip. And that's where you should feel it. I don't want you just pushing forward. I want you to tuck that pelvis under and then think about squeezing that glute to come forward. So you should really limit your range and you shouldn't be getting into this really dumping forward, all right? If you're doing this right, you should be tucking under, squeeze at that glute to bring forward, and you should feel that stretch a little bit more here. Now, if you're super tight in the quads, there's a good chance that you will feel it there as well. That's fine, don't stress that out. But we're just basically gonna hold this for a good 40 seconds to 60 seconds again. I might rush through it a little bit just to kind of get you guys through it, and then you can kind of revisit this on your own or spend a bit more time on it after we're done. But you're just gonna breathe nice and easy into it. And as you do, continue to try and push that range. Okay, don't just stay there. Continue to try and push forward. So you shouldn't just be kind of like relaxing into this. Like this is active stretching. You're trying to actively push that hip forward and loosen up the front of that hip. If you want to, you can actually even grab this hand and go and open up to what we call like on an angle to the opposite side. And that should really also provide another lengthy stretch here at the front of the hip. But for the first round, even what I like to do is just stay in this position and then add that second bit into the next one. So I'm just coming up to my time here, 2, 1. And before I go into my next one, I'm now gonna take that hip through its range of motion. So I'm gonna go knee down, foot out to the side, and I'm gonna basically have my knee, as you can see it, directly underneath my hip. So the other foot lines up, hopefully with the knee, and then I'm just gonna take that hip through its range of motion. So I'm gonna push all the way back and then come all the way forward. And I don't wanna turn this into a push-up where I'm bending at the elbows. Okay, it's the hip that comes all the way back and the hip that comes all the way up into the ground here. So you'll see it from the side on now. So I'm just gonna go forward and back, and it's that hip at the front here that I'm trying to really open up. So you may only be able to kind of go to here, and that's fine, But eventually what you want to be able to do is really open that hip up, and we're just trying to capitalize on the stretch that we just did and take that hip through its range of motion. I know this looks funny, I know this looks weird, but trust me guys, it's a good exercise, especially after what we just did, in order to get you to explore that range of motion. So that should about do it. Honestly, I'm not stressing in terms of repetitions. Anywhere from 8 to 10 reps is fine. And now we're gonna hit that other side. So again, I'm gonna tuck that pelvis under. So tuck, and then I'm gonna try and push that hip forward. So I'm gonna hold here. Nice big hold. Nice big deep breaths, and each time you breathe out, it's a really good opportunity to try and push a little bit more range of motion. Again, remember, just make sure you don't just let that go. You're trying to keep that tuck and trying to squeeze that glute to bring that hip forward. From there, I can actually even try and come over on the angle like we discussed. Really holding that position. Big drive. Allowing yourself to sink into it a little bit more. Near there, we've got another 10 seconds. Two, one, cool. All right, so again, before I change sides, I'm going to go knee down, kick the leg out to the side. I'm gonna come all the way back, all the way forward, take that hip for its range of motion, go back, forward, and we're just gonna go about 8 repetitions here. Really stretch back, take a second to almost pause there to open that hip up. We'll go 2 more. Last one. Perfect. Okay, so for simplicity's sake, if you want to do another round, which I highly recommend if you have the time, press pause now, do another round. It's about 40 to 60 seconds on the stretch and 8 to 10 repetitions on the adductor rock backs. Okay, for our next order of business, we're gonna do like a 90-90 QL stretch. All right, so the QLs are the muscles that insert in and around the spine and come down to the hip. And when they're tight, they kind of make you feel like you're a little bit compressed either side. They can get kind of jacked up when we go for skate in terms of when we're trying to pop our boards, perform any kind of rotational tricks as well. So if we loosen them up, it'll just allow us to then get into a bit of a 90-90 that's a little bit more efficient, a little bit more free moving. So we're gonna start by creating what I call 90 degrees at the front here. So basically your knees in front of your hip and your foot is in line with your knee. And we're gonna have the same thing from the side here. So you can see my knees in line with my hip and then my foot's in line with my knee. From there, I'm basically just going to come down. So I've got my right knee out. I'm gonna go right elbow on the ground, and then I'm just gonna reach around into this position. So I'm thinking as I'm reaching, I'm coming out onto an angle, and I'm gonna just take a nice big breath in and then breathe out. And as I do, I'm gonna reach a little bit further. So my fingers are on the ground. I'll show you with the other side from the other angle, but I'm just continuing to reach away. Take a big breath in and then reach out and continuing to try to reach away. So I'm just gonna keep holding this position and then breathing in and really trying to drop my shoulder down towards the ground and then trying to reach away. Continue to reach in this position. 2, 1, and now let's go the other side. So this one I'm gonna do on the opposite side, but from the behind so you can get a look at it. So I'm gonna go left leg. So you can see here, again, right? Foot's in line with the knee, knees in line with the hip, and you see on the other side, you can't see it from there, but I've got my knee in line with my hip and my heel in line with my knee. I'm gonna drop down to my elbow, and then I'm gonna reach around like so. So as I'm holding this hand, breathe breath in, and then as I breathe out, I'm almost gonna crawl my fingers away, and that's gonna provide a really nice stretch through that QL, through the lower part of those hips. So big breath in, and then big breath out. Big breath in, big breath out. And I'm just gonna continue to hold into those positions. Nice big hold. Last one, try and get that last little bit of reach. Perfect. Okay, cool. So from there, I'm just gonna take you through some 90-90 variations. So the first one we're gonna do, and actually the first round, what you kind of wanna do is put your hands behind. You're gonna have your heels in front of your knees. Now, how close your heels are to your bum will dictate how aggressive this mobility drill is on your hips. So you might wanna start kind of a little bit conservative. I'll show you what I mean. So a little bit conservative here. And you're basically gonna have the heels just outside of your knees, and you're gonna try and drop your knees down side to side. So having your hands back is just gonna allow you to loosen up those hips. You don't wanna go too slow with this version. We're just going side to side, opening up those hips, back and forth. Now, some of you may only be kind of able to go into about this range of motion here and not get your both knees down to the ground. That's fine. Work to the range of motion you have. Potentially look to even take your heels a little bit further away to allow you to drop those knees down side to side on both sides. And then as the weeks go on, start to bring your heels up a little bit closer. The higher you bring your heels up towards your bum, the more you're challenging that hip in terms of mobility and range of motion. So you eventually want to be able to get to the point where you have your heels kind of just in front of your knees, like so, and being able to really challenge those hips into that internal and external rotation movement, back and forth. And we're just going to play around with this side to side and through. Now you can see as well, as I've rotated out to the side, I've left enough room for my knees to drop down on both sides. Don't be so close that the knees coming up over the foot. So that's why I was saying have your heels just outside of your knees. So by the time you rotate out to the side, you've left enough room for that to happen. Cool. So from there, you can actually explore another QL stretch on either side, and then look to progress your 90-90. So what I mean by progressing them is the first one, do it with your hands down, really aiming to kind of challenge your mobility. But the second round through, what we're gonna do is try and challenge that hip a bit. So the first challenge it is by taking your hands off the ground and moving through that same range of motion. Now you're really kind of challenging that hip to do a little bit more work as you go through that 90-90 position. What people tend to do when they do this movement is they force their upper body to go the opposite way because they're afraid of going that way. Make sure your shoulders follow the movement and that you're not going against it to allow your hips to drop down. And now, as you get a bit more mobility, you can start to really loosen those hips up by going through side to side. If this is a problem, simply go back to this until you can kind of get both knees down and then add the next challenge. So moving side to side for 8 to 10 repetitions. The final one I'm gonna give you is trying to challenge the hip by getting those heels up off the ground as soon as possible. So at the beginning as well, as you're coming up, you might just be able to get the heels up from here, side, plant them down again, and then rotate, lift them up off the ground slightly, down and rotate. But eventually what you want to do is try and get those heels up off the ground really early, rotate as much as you can, and then plant them down at the last second. So now you're really looking to kind of challenge the hip through that range of motion. We've done a lot of mobility, we've done a lot of stretching work at those hips, and now we're just looking to kind of challenge that stability at the hip joint by forcing them to kind of work through that internal and external rotation movement with our 90-90s. Okay, so there's some progressions. Again, you want to do the QL stretch, so we're in on our elbow and then reaching out to the side, and then work through a 90-90 variation that suits your level. So anywhere between 2 to 3 rounds, the first variation kind of going side to side is going to work well just for some mobility, but then as the weeks go on, look to challenge yourself with the next variation and look to make things a little bit harder. It really pairs nicely with that stretch because you allow yourself to stretch into position and then perform the 90-90, but I'll leave that to you guys depending on how many rounds you want to do yourself and how much time you have in order to keep this short. Let's keep this moving. Okay, we're down to our final 2 exercises. Our second last exercise requires our foam roller. And this is gonna be a little bit of a hard one for me to describe because it is the most difficult one, but it does create a really nice movement into those hips and you'll be feeling really nice and buttery after you do it. So I'm gonna grab my roller. You're gonna need a wall, and basically I'm gonna lay down like so. I'm gonna have my heel's in line with my knee and my hip is just in front of my knees. So if you see me from side on, my hip's just in front of my knees and I'm sitting in this position. From there, what I'm gonna try and do is I'm gonna get the roller to sit in between my knees. Now I'm gonna have my feet, again, in line with my knees. I'm gonna provide a little bit of a squeeze. I'm gonna drive my hips up slightly off the ground, not high, just slightly off the ground. And from there, what I'm gonna try and do, and this is quite difficult, so don't be bummed if you can't get this straight away and it takes a couple of weeks, but I'm gonna try and provide a little bit of movement by trying to drive one knee up to the ceiling, the other one comes down, then I go the opposite side, back and forth. So one knee comes up to the ceiling, other one comes down, and then I'm just switching side to side. And basically, I'm just trying to get that movement going up and then down. And what's really important though, is that your feet stay flat on the wall. Don't come up onto your toes or don't come up onto your heels. The movement needs to come from the hips. So if my knees are going up and down, think about what's happening at the hip. Say if that's the hip joint, I'm just rotating, so I'm coming up and down, and I'm just trying to create a little bit of that nice motion back and forth. And you should see your roller just kind of rotating on that spot. So nice and easy, breathe into it. I know this can kind of be a little bit frustrating to kind of get, and it might seem a little bit weird, but this movement and how it affects your lower back is going to be really integral in getting those hips feeling really nice and buttery. So if you want to give yourself a second now to rest, try it again. So remember again, have your heels in line with your knee, your hip just in front of your knees, squeeze here, bum just slightly off the ground, and then now you're going to try and push one knee up to the ceiling, the other one comes down, bring the other one up, and then come down. And again, you're just rotating up and then down, up and then down. I'm just gonna keep going back and forth. You don't need to go quick with this, the slower the better, and just allow you to get that range, like that movement down and really working well. Back and then forth, and we're just honestly gonna do about 30 seconds of work, slow and controlled. All right, so we're down to the last exercise. Congratulations if you made it this far. We're basically giving the hips all the love that they're gonna need, and now we're just looking to kind of challenge them a little bit and take them through some range of motion. So the easiest thing to do, I'm gonna show you how to do this on a chair, because it's gonna allow you to kind of deload your upper body and really just focus on what's happening at the hip. So I'm gonna go into like a little bit of a hip hinge position or like a single leg deadlift position. You guys might recognize it more in terms of like, say, the bottom of your push stride. My back, you can see, is nice and straight. I'm gonna use this chair for a little bit of support. Now, I'm gonna use only one hand because what's really important for you to get is what's happening at the hip. So my hand's gonna go on my hip here at the side so I can feel all the movement coming from in here. From there, I'm just basically gonna look to open up and then close, all right? And so open up and then close. And the reason I want you having your hand here on your ass is so that you can feel the movement coming from the hip. Most people try and kick back with that leg. It's not about you trying to send your shoulders back into this position here or trying to kick that leg up really high. The movement all needs to come from the hip of the leg that's on the ground. So I'm just gonna open up, close, open up, close, back and forth. And that's what I'm just gonna work. Just that range of motion, back and close, all right? As you see from the front, so I'm opening up. See if I can do this without it. So opening up and then closing. Now you also see that my knee's tracking straight. As I open, my knee doesn't buckle in. It doesn't really turn out. It stays in that nice neutral position. So open, close, open, whoop, close, all right? So now let's go the other side. So you see it from this side. So I'm gonna open up, and now as I come down, remember, get that last little bit of movement. Don't just kind of stop here. You got that last little bit of what we call like internal rotation at the hip. You open and then close all the way. And look, you see that back leg is relatively straight. All the movement is coming from the leg on the ground. I'm not trying to kick this or open this leg up. All right, I'm just opening and then closing, opening, 3, we'll go 2 more, all the way up, last one, and close, all right? Now, When you're ready for the next challenge, if you feel like that was at your level and you kind of like, that's where you need to be, that's fine. I'm gonna show you the next one, or in terms of like getting yourself to the point where you can do this at body weight, because eventually that is the goal. We wanna try and take the support away. And when you get to this part of this little hip series, the Buttery hip series, you wanna try and challenge yourself to work this on its own. So the first thing you can do is just try and use the chair less. So as you open, just have it there so that you can kind of tap away. So the wobbles, you can kind of get them under control when you need to, but really you're trying to just keep your hand off the chair as much as possible, all right? And eventually what you kind of want to be able to do is just get that hand all the way off. See, I kind of need it there. And that's why it's good to just have it there just in case. You can also do this just up against the wall as well. Last one, and close, all right? So we'll go other side now, open. See, I've taken my hand away, but I've kind of got it close by just in case I do get any wobbles, because it can get frustrating if you start wobbling, you can't get any good quality repetitions in, and you want to build that over time. 4, let's go 2 more, up, good, last one, and close, perfect. All right, so that's what you want to challenge yourself with over the next couple of weeks. Each time you come to this section, try and get yourself to rely less and less on the chair and challenge more the stability at that hip in opening and closing. Hope you guys enjoyed that. There is so much that I wanted to put into this program. I wanted to keep it under 20 minutes. I think I've already blown that and we're going up into about 30 minutes. But hopefully what we'll do is we'll do a Buttery Hips program number 2 and include some of the more advanced stuff in there.